Alright guys, today's goal is to solve equations with simplification. In other words, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be dealing with equations that we have to simplify before we can solve. Most of the time when you have to simplify before you can solve an equation, it's because there's either the distributive property in there or we have a variable written more than one time. Anytime we have a variable written more than one time, we have to simplify before solving. In fact, it's so important that I want you to write it down. It's coming up on the screen right now. Go ahead and copy this down. I'm not going to have anyone pause it this time. This isn't going to take that long, but go ahead and copy this down. No, Luis, I'm not singing the copy down song, no matter how many times you ask. Those of you not in Luis's class, sorry. So, before solving an equation, you must ensure that the variable is only written one time. Let me put that in more common language. Before you solve an equation, you can only have the variable written one time. One time. Just to make sure you heard it. One time. Very good. Now, if you could go ahead and copy down the equation that just popped up on the screen. We're going to simplify it. This is really, really easy, guys. Just like when we were dealing with combining like terms, the first thing I'm going to do now that we know this is possible is I'm going to go through every problem and identify my like terms. So I'm going to put circles around my y's. Those aren't really circles because the pen did something weird. And a square around all of my constants. But hold on a second, hold on a second, hold on a second. Because when I'm looking at this, I don't care about the right side of my equation in this one. All I care about is where my y's are, and my y's are on my left side. So I'm only going to identify any like terms that I can see in the left side of my equation. Right now, that's just the 3y and the 2y. So just like any other time we see like terms, we're going to combine them now that I have identified them. So we identified our like terms, we're going to combine them. 3 plus 2 is 5y equals 25. Now, I need to go ahead and solve this. Remember, the key is that before I solve, I have to have y, or my variable, only written one time. So I'm going to go ahead and just divide by 5 now. I have y written one time. I need to get rid of that 5, so I divide both sides by 5. And my final solution is y equals positive 5. I'll give you guys a few more seconds to finish writing that down, and then we're going to move on to the next equation. Little Jeopardy there for you, in case you've never seen the show. Great show, by the way. You should watch it sometime. Anyways, we got 4y minus 2y plus 7 equals 21. Let's go ahead and take a look at this one. Again, I'm only worrying about the side of my equation with my variables on it. Next week, starting, I believe, Friday, we are going to start talking about what happens if I have variables on both sides of the equation. But for this week, we are only worrying about what happens when I have variables on one side. So I'm going to start on the side of the equation with a variable on it, and I'm going to identify my y's. So I'm going to circle my y's because, hey, they're like terms. But I've got an extra term here, so I'm going to go ahead and just kind of put that one in a triangle, just so that I know I do see it. It's a different term, but I'm not going to touch it right now. I'm going to go ahead and combine my like terms, so positive 4 plus negative 2 would be written out like this, 4 minus 2, which equals 2. So I now have 2y plus 7 equals 21. I look at my equation and I see that I only have y written one time now, so I'm going to go ahead and solve. I could divide by 2 or I could subtract 7. Well, if I divide by 2, I've got 2y plus, I would have y plus 7 halves equals 21 halves. Not really user friendly, so instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by subtracting 7 from both sides. Those two 7s will cancel and I get 2y equals 14. I'm going to change colors a little bit here, divide both sides by 2, and y equals 7. Please remember, ladies and gentlemen, we are always going to use our inverse operations. And just to make sure we're still remembering those, we're going to write them down. Our inverse operations are multiply and divide, add, and subtract. Sorry if you guys heard that. My neighbor upstairs, I think, just fell on the floor again, and the chandelier is trying to fall off the ceiling. Lovely doing your work in an apartment sometimes. Anyways, please remember that we are in fact using the inverse operations, and since we are using the inverse operations, all I have to do is remember the word opposite. Okay, remember the word opposite, guys. Let's go ahead and move on. I think I have one more problem for you before I want you to try some on your own. This one looks a little different because the v's are split apart, but it's okay. It works the same way. I still start by identifying my like terms. And identifying any terms which do not have a like term. And now I'm going to simplify this. So 12 plus 8 is, hopefully you all just said 20 for me. If not, hopefully you at least knew that it was 20. So I've got 20v minus 7 equals 73. Now I'm going to pause it for just a second here. I want you guys to put it on pause for about 45 seconds. Solve this on your own, and then we'll compare notes in a second. Alright, so what you should have done is identified that the inverse operation of negative or minus 7 is plus 7. So we're going to add 7 to both sides. And now I've got 20v equals 80. Then you should have identified that the inverse operation of 20 times v is divide by 20. And you get v equals 4. There you go. Please remember, once again, we are using inverse operations at all points in time. Coming up on the slide, you now see 5 different math problems. What I want you guys to do is I'm going to have you pause the screen for 10 minutes. 10 whole minutes. I want you to pause the video. What you guys are going to do is you are going to take the time. You're going to take 5 minutes. Remember, 5 minutes. And you're going to solve these equations on your own. After that, you're going to share out in the group for another 5 minutes and share out what your answers were. You need to go through all 5 of these, solve them on your own, and then work them out as a group together to make sure everyone got the correct answer. That should take about 10 minutes. And then what I want you to do is please just start playing the video again. We got a couple more things to go through today. Alright, so now that you're back with me, let's talk about what happens if I've got the distributive property somewhere in my equation. And the distributive property is actually really, really easy to work with. Okay? What we're going to be doing is very simply distributing. So when I distribute, I take that 3 and I multiply it times 2r and times 5. Please remember that we are multiplying. In fact, that's so important, I'm going to have you write it down in your notes. The distributive property sorry guys, it takes a while to write on this thing, means multiply. You need to have this written down probably a few thousand times in your notes just to make sure we never forget it. The more times we write something, the better off we are at remembering it. Please remember that we're going to multiply. The number of times I see a student tell me 3 distributed in, and they add the 2 numbers makes me want to cry. You don't want to add these numbers. You need to multiply them. So when I add these in, I've got 3 times 2, which is 6. 3 times 5, which is 15, equals 12. Now, I just realized that I'm in a kind of dumb mood because I was going to ask who spotted my mistake. Unfortunately, even if I ask it, you guys can't tell me. So I'm just going to go ahead and fix it myself. I've got 6r plus 15 equals 12. Solve for r. We subtract 15 minus 15. 6r equals negative 3. Divide by 6, divide by 6. R equals negative 3 over 6 doesn't simplify into an integer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look and see top and bottom. Is there a number that I can divide both of those by? Yes, I can. I can divide them both by 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. My final answer is r equals negative 1/2. Okay, guys, I'm starting to reach that 15-minute limit mark, but that's okay because we should be about 26 minutes into the group by the time we're done with this little section here. We are going to go ahead and look at this piece, and again, I've got the distributive property, so I just distribute out that negative 2. Alright, I don't know if you guys can hear this, but the guy upstairs literally is now pounding on his floor. I don't know why. It's making it really hard to make this video, but I apologize for that. If you do hear it, I just figured I'd warn you, it's not me. So negative 2 times g and negative 2 times negative 5. Negative 2 times g gives me negative 2g. Negative 2 times negative 5 gives me positive 10, and that equals 4. So again, from here, you guys are just going to go ahead and solve it on your own. I'm going to ask you to please pause the video for 1 minute. And if one member of the group at the end of that minute could stand up and work through it for me, I would appreciate it. And then you'll just be able to check your answer when you unpause the video. So one more time, go ahead and pause this video, and I'll talk to you in a few seconds. Whoops. I accidentally hit the wrong button. So if I remember right, I had negative 2g minus 10 equals 4. Add 10 to both sides, divide by negative 2, and you should have gotten g equals negative 7 for the last one. Just clarifying there, guys. If I remembered it incorrectly, I apologize. I accidentally hit the wrong button, and I do not want to re-record 12 minutes, well, almost 13 minutes worth of my voice at this point. You have one last problem on the board. Here's what I want you guys to do with this one. Very important. You are going to try this one completely on your own. This should not take the remaining time in the group. This should not take the remaining time in this rotation. You should have somewhere in the nature of about 10 minutes left in this rotation. This should not take that whole time, guys. But what I would like you to do is please simplify this as soon as you can show either Miss Ramirez or Miss N that you got to the correct answer. I want you guys to pull out your worksheets from the other group and get to work on them. Finish it up so you have no homework tonight. As soon as you can show Miss Ramirez or Miss N that you have finished, pull out your worksheet from the other group and show and finish it so that you have no homework tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, go ahead and finish this off. And please remember that you are going to rotate. Like I said, it should be anywhere in the next 5 to 10 minutes. It just depends on how the timing has worked out to this point. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.